For the last 4 months, Chinese hackers have persistently attacked computers here at the New York Times. I'm Marcus Mabry. We'll be joined later by the New York Times Company's Chief Information Officer. But first, reporter Nicole Perlroth wrote this story, and she's on the line now from San Francisco. Nicole, a pretty extraordinary story. Can you describe the cyber attack to us?
Hi, Marcus. Thanks for having me on. So for the last 4 months, hackers, we believe Chinese hackers, have been inside the Times systems up until about last week. They broke in around September 13th, and from there they spent about 2 weeks snooping around our systems until they found what's called a domain controller, which has usernames and hashed or passwords for every single New York Times employee. Since then, we have evidence that they infiltrated at least 53 New York Times employees' computers, most of them outside the newsroom.
Meaning in bureaus overseas and in places like China?
It's not clear, actually. We never actually looked. I never actually looked at the list of usernames, except for the ones for which they siphoned documents from, which were David Barbosa, our Shanghai bureau chief, and Jim Yardley, who's formerly our Beijing bureau chief.
And what were the hackers after in those computers?
It was very clear, I think, even early on, what they were after. This was a very targeted attack, and the timing of it coincided with the investigation David Barbosa did into the net worth of relatives of Wen Jiabao, the Chinese prime minister. After that story published, there had been some speculation in China that David had some sort of deep throat, when in fact he really sourced that story from publicly available documents in China. So we think that they were after sort of these perceived sources, when in fact it was a little bit of a misbegotten search.
Thanks, Nicole. We actually have a little bit of a reaction from the Chinese on these allegations.
According to some investigative results, which showed no proof and had groundless evidence and baseless conclusion, China had participated in online attacks. That is a totally irresponsible conclusion. China is also a victim of online attacks. China's laws clearly ban online attacks.
Now, Nicole, despite the response from the spokesman there for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the Chinese are actually getting a bit of a reputation for this. What kind of attacks do they usually undertake? And is it a surprise that they'd be after this information from the Times?
It's very interesting because increasingly over the last 3 years, I would say, a number of U.S. corporations have come out and said they've been targeted by China, starting with Google in 2010. Later, you saw security companies like RSA say that they had been breached. Lockheed Martin said it had been breached. Northrop Grumman said it's targeted by China almost on a daily basis. And the challenge for me in this beat has been, okay, now walk me through this. You're accusing China of something that's pretty great, but you need to back it up with evidence. And the problem is no company wants to step forward and sort of open up their systems and give forensic proof. So here we are in this interesting situation where my own employer was hacked, and I was able to see exactly what happened inside our systems. There is increasing evidence that since 2008, Chinese hackers have targeted Western journalists. One of the firms we hired to help us respond to the breach is Mandiant, and they had put together a report in December based on just the investigations that they had worked on. They had counted some 30 journalists at Western news organizations that had been targeted by China. They maintain a short list of journalists that they repeatedly attack. This was also in our story, but according to some sources that we have, last year, Bloomberg was also hacked after they published a similar investigation into the net worth of relatives of the Chinese vice premier.
Excellent. Nicole, thanks so much. We'll keep on the story and keep coming back to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
These attacks, as Nicole said, were aimed at specific journalists here at the New York Times. The New York Times Company's Chief Information Officer, Mark Franz, joins me now with more on the newspaper's response and the company's response more broadly. Mark, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Marcus. Thanks for having me on.
Now, in Nicole's story, she reported that we think these hackers were active inside the systems on or about September 13th. We weren't really aware, though, of the activity until October 25th, and even on November 7th, they were still inside our systems.
That's right.
Why does it take so long?
So, as Nicole said in her story, some of the normal kind of antivirus programs don't really work anymore, and what we had to do is ask our outside firms to kind of raise the sensitivity level of their sensors, and once they did that, I think, around late October, we began to see all this activity, and then we discovered where they were and what they were doing.
Now, one of the things that you also said to Nicole in that story was that it appears that the hackers could have actually wreaked havoc with our systems, but that's not what they were after. They weren't actually after wreaking havoc with our publishing system, our online publishing system. Does that surprise you that they actually didn't go for that commercial interest?
At first, we weren't sure what they were after, and we did look at all of our systems, and we made sure that none of our customer data was compromised, none of our employee data, which is in really separate systems. And once we sort of saw that, we realized they were zeroing in on our reporters, and this was not cyber sabotage, but cyber espionage.
Mm-hmm. And if they were actually going after our systems, one of the things that came out in the story was that on election night, for instance, they were very active. And of course, we had huge traffic online on election night.
That's right.
They could have stopped us publishing on election night if they wanted.
They could have. Things could have been very ugly, but they didn't.
How do you prepare for this in this kind of day and age when these attacks could come from China or from anywhere, frankly, and it could be espionage or it could be commercial sabotage? How do you prepare yourself? How does the company protect itself?
It's kind of a cultural thing. There are many things we can do in technology to harden our systems and make them more secure. But a lot of the ways the hackers get in is it's a phishing email where they'll just send an email that looks like a normal email, and you'll click on a link, and then they'll download a virus on your machine, and then boom, they're in all over again.
So any employee who clicks on that phishing email exposes the company.
That's right. So what we've really worked to do is raise the awareness of everyone at the company, and that, I think, is one of the many reasons we went public with this, because this is a global problem.
You think they'll be back?
I'm sure they'll be back.
All right. We'll keep watching. Mark Franz, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for us for now, but we'll be back throughout the day with more live video programming. For now, I'm Marcus Mabry, and thanks for watching the New York Times.